In order to define a change strategy that is tailored for your organization and fits your organization, it's important to start with an organizational assessment. But what exactly is this? That's what I want to talk about here today. My name is Eric Kimberling. I'm the CEO of Third Stage Consulting. We're an independent consulting firm that helps clients throughout the world reach the third stage of digital transformation success. And we're helping clients through change management initiatives and their overall digital transformations. One of the questions that comes up is, how do we address change management? What are the things we need to do to ensure that we're successful in our change efforts? And a lot of times organizations don't know where to start. They don't want to take a one-size-fits-all approach. They don't want to just try a bunch of different things or throw a bunch of spaghetti at the wall to see what sticks. They want to have a very tailored change strategy that fits their needs, fits their culture, and fits their future goals and objectives. So what I want to do today is talk about what an organizational change assessment is, why it's so important, how you can incorporate this into your overall change strategy. Now, if you'd like to learn more about change management and learn more best practices as it relates to change management, I encourage you to download our guide to organizational change management for free on our website. You can find that by scanning the QR code right here or go to the links below. Let's start off by talking about why organizational assessments are so important. As I mentioned at the start of the video, it's really important that you define a change strategy that's tailored for you as an organization. And we don't want to just take a one-size-fits-all strategy and try every single change management tool that's out there, every change management framework that's out there. We want to tailor it and target the things that are most important to our organization. And part of the reason why change readiness assessments are so critical is because it allows us to proactively identify where the risks and where the change management issues are likely to lie. Now, a lot of times organizations go into these exercises thinking that change management's not going to be that difficult. Change resistance won't be an issue because people are excited about the new vision. They're excited about the opportunity to have new tools and better processes and that sort of thing, and that probably is true. But inevitably, as you get further and further into the transformation, you find that people will resist change. So the key isn't to identify or answer the question of whether or not people will resist change. It's how much will they resist change and who exactly will resist the change and what are the root causes of that resistance. And so during an organizational assessment, oftentimes what you do is you find some issues that are part of the culture of the organization. It could be something like there's a perception of lack of communication between different silos or different departments within an organization. That may just be the way things are for your organization, but as you go to deploy an enterprise-wide technology, that's going to create resistance to change because people are used to operating in silos. And now with an enterprise technology, it's likely that they are going to have to think more about the upstream and downstream impacts of what they do in their individual jobs. And this all leads to resistance. So we need to identify things like that, traits and characteristics within your organization, your culture, your organizational design, the politics, the organizational dynamics of your organization. All those things may have strengths, but there's also going to be weaknesses that cause resistance to change. So that's why organizational assessments are so important for those two reasons, because you can create a very tailored and more prescriptive surgical approach to change management, and because you can proactively identify what the sources of resistance are likely to be, so that you can proactively get ahead of that and create a change strategy and plan that addresses those needs. And what I'll do in the next sections is talk about how to do that. What is it we do to assess an organization, and what are some of the inputs we use along the way? Let's talk a little bit about what exactly an organizational assessment is. And the way we execute this at Third Stage Consulting is there's really two main tracks that we pursue in parallel. One is a quantitative, anonymous survey-based approach where we submit anonymous surveys to employees to find out information about the culture of the organization, the leadership style, the communication style, the level of collaboration, past change initiatives, other things that are likely to influence how this change initiative goes. And the reason we do this anonymous survey is because it allows us to quantify some of the aspects of organizational readiness and organizational assessments, but also because it allows us to get an unfiltered view from employees who are going to be completely anonymous, and they're more often likely to share candid feedback on the organization through these online tools. It also allows us to really understand the demographic makeup of the organization and some of the motives and drivers of different people throughout the organization. This quantitative information is a good starting point to look at how an organization benchmarks to other organizations, and internally within the same organization, how is this organizational assessment and these organizational indicators trending over time. And it's something that we can do multiple times throughout a transformation to look at what the trends are and to see how we're tracking along the way. The second dimension of an organizational assessment is going to be more qualitative, and it's more focus group based activities. So we'll meet with small subsets of different departments or different locations depending on the size and complexity and scope of the organization. And we'll try to understand more qualitatively more about the culture, the dynamics of the organization, the political dynamics, the leadership style, the level of collaboration, level of innovation, all that sort of stuff that feeds into what our change strategy needs to be. And what we do is we take those two pieces of information, the quantitative track and the qualitative track from the focus groups, and we assess that and analyze what it tells us. And having done this for so many different clients, when we look at it, we can usually see where the pockets of resistance are likely to reside. And we start to really dig into and understand what the root causes of that potential resistance are going to be. Now we can suddenly take some different change tools and strategies and tactics and apply them in a very tailored way, in a very surgical way that targets the things that we've identified in that organizational assessment. Once we've conducted an organizational assessment and we've done our anonymous surveys to gather quantitative information, we've done our focus groups with employees to gather qualitative information, now we analyze that information. And some of the examples of things we look for during these assessments are things that, first of all, would suggest that certain departments are more or less resistant than others. So as we look at quantitative and qualitative information, we'll identify and prioritize which areas or which parts of the business are likely to have more trouble with change, not because they're bad people or because they don't want to change, but because there's something organizationally or politically or communication or leadership-wise that's driving that part of the organization to potentially resist change going forward. A good example would be sometimes we'll work with clients who have different departments that feel more overworked than others. They feel like that they don't have the tools, the support, the leadership, the clarity of communication, and things of that nature. And that tells us, in that case, in that assessment, that that department or that part of the organization is likely to struggle with change more than potentially other parts of the business. So it may be that that becomes a high priority for us to target that part of the business. Another example would be a lot of times we'll do these assessments and find that there's a perception that there's not enough clarity of communication from leadership within the organization. And that might tell us that one of our recommendations might be to create more deliberate communications, more frequent communications related to the changes that are forthcoming, coming from the leadership to address that concern and that gap that is perceived within the organization. And these are just two micro examples of many results that we often find during these assessments, but hopefully it gives you a flavor of the types of things you want to look for. And again, organizational assessments and the analysis behind it isn't simply a matter of asking people, are you ready for change and are you open to change and do you support the change? Because on the surface, most people are. The real issue is digging below the surface and not really even asking the question of whether or not you want the change, but rather dig deeper and understand what are those organizational dynamics that are more likely to cause resistance in some cases, and in other cases it might actually lead to support for the changes more so than other parts of the organization. Once we've analyzed the organizational results and we've come up with a set of recommendations and findings, now we can create a more prescriptive change strategy that's tailored to the organization. If it's an organization that's very risk intolerant, for example, it may be that we're going to have a totally different change strategy for that organization than one that's more tolerant of risk and has had more successful change initiatives in the past. If we know that certain parts of the organization are going to be more resistant than other parts of the organization, we can tailor more of our change efforts for those parts of the organization. And if we understand the politics and the organizational dynamics and the culture of the organization, we can tailor a change strategy and plan that fits those specific needs and fits that situation. We also have to look at where the organization is headed, which is not just the stuff that we gather in the organizational assessment, but this is getting back to our overall digital transformation strategy. Once we know what it is the organization and the leadership team wants to accomplish as a result of this transformation, we can look at the gaps between the way things are today and the way the things are that they view things potentially being in the future. And once we understand that gap, now we can create a change strategy that's very tailored for where that journey will take them. So this is just a couple examples of how the results from the organizational assessment can and should lead to a tailored change strategy and plan that fits the specifics of your organization. Once we've defined the change strategy, the change plan, the change tactics, the tools that we're going to use, now we've got to factor this all into the overall program plan. So it may be that our software technology provider has created a technology implementation roadmap. Now we've got to figure out how to build this change management strategy and plan into the overall roadmap. And just as a word of warning, it's quite often that there's going to be some kind of reconciliation that needs to happen between the two. Oftentimes the software vendor, the software provider can and wants to move a lot faster than the organization can move. So a lot of times the change strategy informs a longer duration or more resources dedicated to change management and things that may not be in the wheelhouse of the technology provider. But the key here is we have to take this change strategy and plan and not just operate it in silo off on the side in parallel with the overall program. We have to incorporate these activities into the overall transformation program to ensure that we address these organizational issues and give it the proper prioritization and investment of resources that it deserves. So these are just a few things to keep in mind as you think about organizational assessments. If there's one activity that I suggest that every organization do from a change perspective, it is to conduct an organizational assessment. Because if you do that organizational assessment, now you can create a change strategy and plan that fits your needs rather than just trying a bunch of change tactics that you may not have the bandwidth or budget to do, and they may not be very effective. Instead, we can focus in a more prescriptive, more surgical way on who exactly we are and who we're trying to become, and base that on the organizational assessment. We can also use these organizational assessments to track trends and movement over time, so we can see how we're doing and correct along the way and pivot along the way from a change perspective. If you'd like to learn more about change management tactics and strategies, I encourage you to read our Guide to Organizational Change Management. You can download it for free on our website by scanning the QR code right here, or you can go to the links below. So I hope you found this information useful and hope you have a great day.